All right, so today we're going to do a deep dive into something that might seem a little bit counterintuitive.
Yeah.
We're looking at Australian education,
Uh-huh.
specifically swimming and water safety,
Okay.
and how those two things fit into the national curriculum.
Interesting.
You'd think that in a country like Australia, so famous for its beaches and, just the whole water culture,
Yeah.
swimming would just be a no-brainer,
You would think, yeah.
like a given. But
Yeah.
our source today is a paper.
Okay.
And the title of this paper is
I'm ready.
Australian Aquatic Curriculum Reform, Treading Water Carefully.
Oh, interesting.
And it suggests that things aren't that simple.
Well, it really does highlight a fascinating sort of paradox.
Yeah.
Australia, a nation so closely tied to the water,
Right.
seemingly sidelining swimming in its national curriculum.
Yeah. Okay, so let's unpack this.
Yeah.
So what exactly was the situation with swimming in previous curriculums?
So if we rewind back to 1994,
Okay.
the national guidelines were very, very clear about aquatics.
Okay.
The National Statement and Profile for Health and Physical Education included detailed swimming and water safety requirements
Okay.
from the very, very beginning of school.
Wow.
It was all about building confidence and competence in the water, making it, a core part of a child's education.
So kids were learning to swim early on as like part of the standard curriculum?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Imagine this.
Okay.
In those earlier years, the focus was on water familiarization.
Mm-hmm.
So kids were learning to, enter and exit the water safely,
Okay.
moving around in waist-deep water,
Yeah.
submerging to grab objects,
Okay.
floating with aids,
Got it.
and even propelling themselves through chest-deep water.
Wow, that sounds pretty comprehensive.
Yeah.
What about the
Yeah.
water safety aspect? Is that
Uh, uh,
integrated into the lessons as well?
Right alongside those skills,
Okay.
they were learning about water safety,
Mm-hmm.
developing survival techniques,
Okay.
basic first aid,
What?
even how to call for help in an emergency.
Got it.
Then as they move into upper primary,
Mm-hmm.
they built on that foundation,
Okay.
focusing on survival techniques
Mm-hmm.
like sculling,
Mhm.
treading water,
Okay.
and swimming longer distances using different strokes.
Got it.
It was a very structured progression.
It sounds like a very well-defined path,
Yeah.
almost like a swimming and water safety ladder
Mm-hmm.
that they're climbing as they go through school.
Yeah.
So what changed?
Okay.
Where did all of this go
Yeah.
in the current curriculum?
Well, this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
The current Australian curriculum,
Mm-hmm.
Health and Physical Education,
Mm-hmm.
ACE, HPE for short, barely even mentions swimming and water safety.
Huh.
In fact, the only mention is tucked away in the glossary
Really?
under the definition of fundamental movement skills.
Okay.
And even then,
Yeah.
it's a very vague, moving the body through water to safety.
Hold on. So we went from this detailed,
Yes.
structured approach to like a
Okay.
single
Yeah.
vague
A
mention
very vague mention.
in the glossary.
Yeah.
That feels like a huge step back, especially given Australia's, strong water culture.
It is a very curious shift.
Yeah.
The paper suggests one possible reason is the sheer number of topics
Okay.
crammed into the current framework,
Mm-hmm.
the AC. HPE covers such a broad spectrum, mental health,
Yeah.
nutrition
Yeah.
relationships,
Mm-hmm.
physical activity.
Okay.
It's a lot to fit in.
So it's almost like swimming got squeezed out in the process,
it's possible.
even though it's so crucial in a country like Australia that's
Mhm.
surrounded by water.
Yeah, it's one possible explanation.
Yeah.
This limited space
Right.
with so many topics competing for attention
Yeah.
may have led to swimming and water safety
Mm-hmm.
getting overshadowed,
Yeah.
even though they're so fundamental for, a nation surrounded by water.
This national shift is even more interesting when you consider what's happening at the state level.
Yeah.
Didn't some states have their own
Mhm.
more detailed
Yeah.
swimming and water safety components
Yeah.
in their curriculums,
Yeah.
even after the national changes?
That's right.
Okay.
Many states had built up their own curriculums
Uh-huh.
based on those 1994 national guidelines.
Okay.
New South Wales, for example,
Okay.
included water familiarization, safety,
Okay.
and stroke development
Got it.
in their PDHPE syllabus.
Okay.
Queensland listed swimming and water safety as a core skill for movement.
Mm-hmm.
Victoria went even further
Okay.
with a detailed outline of swimming concepts all the way from prep to year 10.
Wow. So it sounds like these states really prioritize swimming.
Yeah, they did.
Were there any states that went the same route as the national framework, downplaying swimming and water safety?
Interestingly enough, the Australian Capital Territory
Okay.
stands out. Their curriculum was actually quite similar to the new national framework.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if there were other factors at play beyond just curriculum space.
Yeah.
Could it be something like cost, for example?
Yeah.
I mean, swimming lessons aren't exactly known for being cheap.
You've hit on a major point.
Yeah.
The paper specifically mentions concerns raised by school principals about the financial strain of running swimming programs.
Okay.
Some were even considering cutting them altogether.
Wow.
And there were calls for government subsidies to help schools cover the costs.
I see. So the cost factor is adding another layer of complexity
It is.
to this whole situation.
Yeah.
How are most Australian schools managing swimming instruction now, given these financial constraints?
Outsourcings are pretty common, especially in primary schools. The concerns around liability, the costs involved, and the lack of readily available qualified staff all contribute to this.
So it's not as simple as just telling the kids to jump in the pool.
No.
There's a whole web of logistics and finances to consider.
Exactly. And this lack of a strong national mandate for swimming, coupled with the pressure of tight budgets, could create a situation where schools, especially those already struggling, feel they have no choice but to cut swimming programs even further.
And that leads us to a much bigger question, doesn't it?
It does.
The whole point of national curriculum reform was to create a system that's equitable and excellent for all Australian children, regardless of their background. But by downplaying swimming, aren't we potentially creating a situation where underprivileged children are denied access to these essential water safety skills?
Precisely.
It seems like a direct contradiction to the goals of the reform. Like we're unintentionally creating a system where swimming becomes a luxury rather than a basic.
And that this lack of access directly contradicts the Gonski report's findings, which stressed the importance of equitable access to quality education, no matter a child's background or where they live in a country like Australia. Being safe around water is a fundamental part of that.
So we're left with this tension between the ideals of the curriculum reform and what's actually happening in schools. Swimming could end up being something only certain children have access to, which raises some serious concerns
It does.
about equity and safety.
Absolutely.
And that brings us to a crucial question.
Right.
What are the long-term implications of this shift for water safety and social justice in Australia? We'll delve into that further in part 2, as we were just talking about that cost barrier to swimming lessons. It really struck me that this isn't just an education issue. This is a social justice issue as well.
Precisely.
You know, denying some children access to this fundamental skill creates a real inequality, especially in a country with such a strong water culture.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
The research actually highlights this concern directly,
Okay.
stating that reducing the emphasis on swimming in the national framework, while perhaps unintentional, could worsen these existing inequalities.
So children with the means would likely still have access to swimming lessons through private instruction or other avenues,
Of course.
while those from disadvantaged backgrounds might miss out entirely.
And that's a deeply concerning thought.
Yeah.
Australia has a high drowning rate.
Right.
And these skills are vital, not just for enjoying the beach, but for basic survival.
It's a sobering thought, really.
Yeah.
We've laid out the problem, but what are the potential solutions? Are there ways to address these challenges?
There are.
Okay.
The paper doesn't just highlight the problem, it also offers potential ways forward.
Okay.
One suggestion is to increase government funding for swimming programs in schools.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If cost is a major barrier, then removing that barrier could have a huge impact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dedicated funding could help schools cover the costs of qualified instructors, pool access, transportation, all those logistical pieces that make offering swimming instruction so difficult?
It would require a real commitment from policymakers, though, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Like, they would need to see this as a priority, a fundamental investment in children's safety and well-being.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that might require a reframing of how we view swimming.
Okay.
Seeing it as a core life skill on par with literacy or numeracy.
Interesting.
But funding is just one piece of the puzzle. Another interesting idea is to rethink the role of swimming teachers.
Oh, okay.
Within the education system.
That's intriguing.
Yeah.
How would that work in practice?
Right now, as we discussed,
Yeah.
many schools rely on outsourcing for their swimming instruction.
Right.
They bring in external instructors to handle the lessons.
Because it's often seen as a specialized skill, separate from the core curriculum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But some experts argue that swimming instruction should be more formally included in teacher training programs.
So equipping teachers with the skills and confidence to lead these lessons themselves.
Precisely.
That's a really good point.
Of course, it wouldn't be without its challenges.
Yeah. What would some of those challenges be?
It would require investment in training programs.
Oh, okay.
Potentially even changes to the structure of teacher education.
But wouldn't this be incredibly costly?
Yeah.
Is that really a realistic solution? Given the financial constraints schools are already facing?
That's a valid question. The paper acknowledges those concerns. But the argument is that embedding this knowledge within the teaching profession could ultimately be more sustainable.
Okay.
It would give schools greater control over swimming instruction and wouldn't rely so heavily on external factors.
Okay.
Like funding for outsourced programs.
It's like building swimming into the DNA of the education system.
Yeah.
Making it an integral part rather than an add-on.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't just be about teaching strokes and techniques.
Right.
It would also be about instilling a culture of water safety from a young age.
Making it part of the school environment.
Yes.
Part of everyday life, not just a once-a-year program.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that could have a ripple effect.
Okay.
Extending beyond the schoolyard into families and communities.
Creating a more water-safe society overall, where those skills and that awareness are just ingrained in the culture.
Precisely.
Yeah.
In addition to these ideas, there are also some really promising examples of partnerships between schools and community organizations.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about those.
Imagine schools collaborating with local swimming clubs,
Okay.
life-saving organizations, or even council-run aquatic centers.
Got it.
They could pool their resources and expertise to create more robust programs.
So leveraging existing infrastructure and knowledge within the community rather than trying to build everything from scratch.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It could take many forms.
Okay.
Maybe shared access to pools and equipment or joint development of training initiatives.
It sounds like a win-win.
Yeah.
Maximizing resources, spreading the costs, and fostering a sense of shared responsibility for water safety within the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it also taps into that community spirit that is so strong in Australia, getting everyone involved, working together toward this shared goal.
It's a powerful approach.
It is.
And you know what strikes me about all of these potential solutions?
Yeah.
Is that they don't have to be mutually exclusive.
That's right.
They could all work together, complementing each other.
That's an important point.
Yeah.
It's not about picking one right answer.
Right.
It's about finding the combination of strategies that works best for each community.
Oh, okay.
Addressing the unique needs and resources of that area.
So a multifaceted approach tailored to the specific context.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that requires flexibility, innovation, and a willingness to try new things.
It's about being open to new ideas.
Yes.
Adapting to changing circumstances. And being willing to challenge some of those long-held assumptions about the role of swimming in Australian society.
And I think that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
We often think of swimming as a leisure activity. Something fun to do on a hot day. But not necessarily essential.
Right, like it's a recreational pursuit, not a crucial life skill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in a country like Australia, surrounded by water, swimming is so much more than that.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental safety skill.
Okay.
Just like knowing how to cross the road safely or what to do in a fire.
And that skill should be available to everyone.
Absolutely.
Regardless of where they come from, where's their financial situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if we don't challenge that assumption, that swimming is just a leisure activity, we risk overlooking the people who don't have those same access or opportunities.
Like the kids who don't live near the beach.
Yeah.
Or whose families can't afford lessons. Or who don't have that intergenerational knowledge being passed down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that can create a cycle of disadvantage.
Okay.
Where certain groups are less likely to develop those water safety skills, putting them at a greater risk.
Right.
It's like a hidden inequality. Masked by this cultural assumption that everyone in Australia knows how to swim.
It's like we're missing a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
If we don't acknowledge those different experiences and make sure that everyone has the opportunity to learn those essential skills.
And that's why this conversation needs to go beyond just checking boxes in a curriculum document.
Right.
It's about challenging those assumptions, raising awareness, and creating a more inclusive approach to swimming and water safety.
It's about weaving water safety into the very fabric of society.
Exactly.
Making it a shared responsibility, not just an individual pursuit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that starts with recognizing that swimming isn't just a leisure activity.
Right.
It's a fundamental life skill, especially in Australia.
So it's about changing our mindset.
It is.
Moving away from the idea that it's just something fun we do in our spare time to this is something everyone needs to know how to do and do safely.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that shift in thinking can have a ripple effect.
Okay.
It can influence policy decisions, funding priorities, even community attitudes and behaviors.
It's about creating a culture.
Yes.
Where water safety is embedded in everything we do.
Yeah.
From how we design our public spaces to how we raise our children.
And that's where the real potential for change lies.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, it's not just about top-down solutions.
Right.
It's about communities coming together, parents teaching their kids, schools prioritizing swimming, and everyone working together to create a safer environment.
It's a collective effort driven by that shared understanding that swimming and water safety are absolutely essential, not optional in Australia.
We've covered so much in this deep dive.
We have.
The history, the challenges, the potential solutions, the cultural factors.
Yeah.
And it's been such a rich and nuanced discussion.
And we've really encouraged you, our listener, to think deeply about this issue and what it means for Australian society.
Because ultimately it's about creating a safer, more equitable, and more inclusive future for all Australians.
That's a great way to sum it up.
Yes.
And we'll pick up the conversation in part 3, where we'll explore some additional facets of this issue and delve even deeper into some of the nuances.
We'll see you soon for the final part of this deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive. And, as we wrap things up today, there's one more layer to this whole swimming issue in the curriculum that I think is really fascinating. And that's the cultural piece of this whole puzzle.
Yeah.
How Australia's, really deep-rooted connection to water shapes this entire conversation around swimming and water safety.
The cultural side of it.
Yeah, so we're not just talking about policies and logistics anymore, but like how this issue intersects with the very identity of Australia as a nation.
Exactly.
Like those images of beaches and surfing and, the iconic lifesavers, it's practically embedded in the national DNA.
It is, yeah.
Growing up in Australia, it almost feels like an innate sort of affinity for the water is just part of who we are as Australians.
It's in our blood.
Yeah. And that makes this whole discussion even more intriguing.
Yeah.
If swimming is so central to Australian culture, why is there even a debate about its place in the curriculum?
Yeah, you'd think it'd just be automatic.
Shouldn't it be a given?
Yeah.
I wonder if it might be.
Why is that?
I wonder if it might have something to do with complacency.
Okay.
Like maybe because it's such a big part of our culture, we take those skills for granted.
Okay.
Assuming that everyone just naturally knows how to swim.
That's an interesting point.
Because it's such a big part of, growing up in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like we've developed a collective blind spot.
We see all those images of Aussies at the beach enjoying the water. And we just assume that everyone has that same level of comfort and skill.
But that's not always the case, is it?
Not always, no.
And even if you are comfortable in the water, that doesn't automatically mean you have the knowledge and skill to stay safe.
Exactly.
To handle an unexpected situation or to help someone else who might be in trouble.
You're right.
Yeah, there's a difference between playing in the waves and, knowing how to respond effectively in an emergency.
Absolutely.
And I think this is where the cultural aspect kind of intersects with the equity issue we were talking about earlier.
Okay, how so?
Well, if we operate under this assumption that swimming is just something everyone does, something that comes naturally to all Australians, then we might not notice the people who don't have those same opportunities.
The people falling through the crack, like the kids who don't live near the beach or whose families can't afford lessons or who don't have that intergenerational knowledge being passed down.
It creates a cycle.
Yeah, and that can create a cycle of disadvantage where certain groups are less likely to develop those water safety skills, putting them at a greater risk.
Yeah, it's like a hidden inequality.
Yeah.
Masked by this cultural assumption that everyone in Australia knows how to swim.
It's like we're missing a crucial piece of the puzzle.
We are.
If we don't acknowledge those different experiences and make sure that everyone has the opportunity to learn those essential skills.
And that's why I think, this conversation needs to go beyond just checking boxes in a curriculum document.
Right.
It's about challenging those assumptions, raising awareness, and creating a more inclusive approach to swimming and water safety.
It's about weaving water safety into the very fabric of society, making it a shared responsibility, not just an individual pursuit.
And I think that starts with recognizing that swimming isn't just a leisure activity.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental life skill.
Especially in Australia.
Especially in Australia.
So it's about changing our mindset.
It is.
Moving away from that idea.
Right.
That it's just something fun we do in our spare time.
Yeah.
This is something everyone needs to know how to do and do safely.
Precisely. And that shift in thinking can have a ripple effect.
Yeah.
It can influence policy decisions, funding priorities, even community attitudes and behaviors.
It's about creating a culture where water safety is embedded in everything we do.
Yes.
From how we design our public spaces to how we raise our children.
And that's where the real potential for change lies. Because ultimately, it's not just about top-down solutions.
Right.
It's about communities coming together.
Yeah.
Parents teaching their kids.
Okay.
Schools prioritizing swimming.
Right.
And everyone working together to create a safer environment.
It's a collective effort.
It is.
Driven by that shared understanding that swimming and water safety are absolutely essential.
Fundamental.
Not optional.
Not at all.
In Australia.
We've covered so much in this deep dive.
We have.
The history, the challenges, the potential solutions.
The cultural factors.
The cultural factors.
And it's been a really rich and nuanced discussion.
It have been.
And, we've really encouraged you, our listener, to think deeply about this issue and what it means for Australian society.
Because ultimately, it's about creating a safer, more equitable, and more inclusive future.
For all Australians.
For everyone.
And before we sign off today, we want to leave you with one final thought to ponder.
Okay.
What if swimming could be declared a national treasure?
Oh.
Right alongside our iconic landmarks and cultural traditions.
Interesting.
How would that change our approach to water safety? How would it shape our investment in swimming education?
Yeah.
And what kind of legacy would we be creating for future generations?
Big questions.
Those are some big questions to consider.
They are.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
We hope it's sparked some new ideas and inspired you to think differently about this really crucial issue.
It's a big one.
Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the topics that matter to you.
See you later.